So we are going over the Business Explorer, also known as Business Insights Explorer, or BIE, within MAS 500. One thing I want to point out when it comes to BIE is that you guys should all have a login for Sage support at sagesoftwareonline.com. Does everyone have a login or know about that?
Yeah, we do.
Has anyone logged into this website before?
No.
I go out there.
Okay. Well, it is part of your support package with Sage, and you might want to go out there because under MAS 500, so what I did is I just went out and logged in, and if you have any other questions, you can definitely email Bryce, and then I'll make sure that I follow up with you guys. But under this customer support list here, you'll see this MAS 500. When you click that, it opens up this portal into the knowledge base. And in there are some knowledge base videos. And those knowledge base videos actually have information on utilizing products like Data Porter, but also setting up and configuring MAS Intelligence is one of them. If you see right here, it says how to create new business insight tasks. So there's some information on here and some training. It's a little bit more general, but it is specific enough that if you followed it and had an understanding of how it's going to operate, you would be able to actually produce some Insights Explorers directly from MAS 500. So just to know that if you log on to the Sage Support Online website and you go underneath Customer Support and you click Sage MAS 500 and you pass down under Knowledge Base videos, you're going to have some of the content that we're going to discuss today. So let's get started. The thing to note about Business Insights Explorer, most people see that under every single module. Under Insights, it's this Explore function, and you have some predefined Explorer views that are set up for you for each one of the modules, and you have the ability to change those Explorer views or create new ones of your own, which is what you guys are learning about today. One thing to note is that if you change anything that is native to the MAS product, so if you change one of these default Explorer views to have unique content to yourself, when you upgrade, it will go away. So it's always a good idea to create your own based on a copy of an existing view, or if you are going to use the existing one just for ease of use, make sure you copy the changes that you make to it. Explorer views are all, what's a good word? They are all handled from a security perspective and from a display perspective in the system manager of MAS 500. And if we're up here in maintenance, we're going to see this link to the Business Insights views and context menus. This is where you can actually go in and see how those views have been set up. So if I look down here and I go, okay, I want to go into my vendor history view, you can just sort of look through the list. It's not very long, but here's my voucher Business Insights Explorer view. And it's going to tell you on SQL which view it's actually using, what columns have been mapped, and how it's being displayed. If there are overwrite captions, as you know, you can make changes to them. And then you also have this thing called navigation relationships. And when you're in the Business Insights Explorer view, the drill down, analyze, and manage, all that information is handled here. So when we create a new view, it's going to make it the most simple thing ever. But when we go and we want to add some, go to the next level, all that functionality is handled under this setup menu. The other thing that you need to know is that the Business Insights Explorer view are part of your security. So as you create new ones, if there are people who can't see it, you need to go into your Maintain Security Groups function, and you'll need to make adjustments as to who can view what and how. All of those are stored under the security group. If we go, I'm just going to choose a security group out here. If we look in our module, it's all under the BE module ID. So even when you create new ones, you may add it for a P, a R, or GL. It's all going to show up underneath this one module ID called BE for Business Explorer. I'm just going to stop real quick, make sure that I'm not going too fast. Everyone online so far?
Yeah, we're good.
Cool. The third aspect is that each one of the Business Insights Explorer views, if you're trying to create something new and introduce it into the MAS 500 product, that function is actually held within the task editor. And if you want to see how it's done, we can actually sort by our module. And I do not know why, but this sort does not always work the best. So I end up having to go down here. And right here is where we see the Business Insights Explorer, this module. Notice I clicked the Explorer, it did not even sort it. But we do have to add what MAS calls a new task, which is just really setting up a new link. So it's setting up these little links within MAS 500. So these little lists all have a task within the Sage product. And now that I've made this little thing go behind my screen, I have to pull it out again. And these tasks, if we just go ahead and double click on it, it'll let us look. This is where we set up which module it's going to be in there, always Business Insights Explorer, how it's connecting to the SQL Server, the place that we store all of our data, and then the name that's being used and how it would be displayed on the screen. Setting up Business Insights Explorer does require some knowledge of SQL. And it's very helpful to have someone in the background, but you need to understand the relationships and where data is stored within MAS 500. Depending upon your version, you can look here. If you're in 7.3 or before, you are going to have something that looks like this as your Schema Browser. It's on your disk, but you'll go in here and you'll see the little Schema Browser with a list of each modules. And as you click through, it'll give you the tables. And in those tables, like let's just choose the vendor table, it will tell you what columns are available. So the Schema Browser becomes very helpful as you're trying to find content and where information is stored. Also, you can just text myself or anyone at ISM within the MAS 500 group, Stuart, Jeb, Becky, Mark, any of us, we can also assist you. Once you do enough reports, you know where data is and you know how the system stores it. It'll also tell you the relationships to those tables, so where other content is, and it will also give you the keys, what's going to make it the primary key. And that's really more knowledge when you're trying to create some reports and make sure that you don't pull in too many records. If you're in 7.4, under System Manager, you will have a new little exploding, oh my goodness, file folder called Schema Browser. And this sort of allows you to more readily find content within MAS 500 because you can do search for fields, search for column names. So it displays all the same stuff that you see within this other, within the MAS 7.3 and before Schema Browser, but this one is just in the product by default. So again, depending upon your version, you have the Schema Browser. Just wanted to point that out. Now, within SQL, everything is organized as views for Explorer view, and the name has to always be the same. So right here, we're looking at VDV, which the system recognizes as views for Explorer view, and then whatever view is actually being pulled from. This name is also stored in MAS 500 within the maintained Business Insights Explorer module. So if you're trying to figure out where content is or how a view was generated, if you go into the Bank Account Explorer view, it's going to, if you look onto the columns, it says right here, the view name is VDV Bank Account. So when you log into your SQL Management Studio, you would find the same thing. So if we go down up here, we'll find VDV Bank Account. And right now, I'm just going to script this as an alter or a change. So the worst thing about MAS 500 views is that they're going to be one extremely long line of code. And sometimes it's helpful as you're making adjustments to sort of go through and obviously create a little bit of, what's a good word, formatting, just like you would a Word document, to see sort of what's going on here. But basically, a view is just a list of columns that are available. And at the very end, you'll see that there is some joins. So it does a select statement, basically choosing the data that you want. And then as we move across, if I can find where the from is, here we go. Then you'll find the different tables that it uses in order to generate. And I'm just going to move this down here so I can see it a little bit better. So the first thing that you see within a view is which fields are being selected, and then which tables they're being selected from. So if I decided that I needed to add a bit of information to this bank account one, and actually this is the best, we can go into the vendor one and do some adjustments there, and we'll sort of show how to create a new one within MAS 500. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to change it. Is everyone following so far? Am I going too fast? I know it all seems like Greek, but trust me, we're always here to assist you and to give you some direction, and that's not really a chargeable offense. You know, utilizing the product can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes, and for people like myself and that MAS 500 team who have had experience, it's really easy to ask questions. So if we look in this vendor lookup, and let's go back over here into MAS 500, let's go into our accounts payable, and let's just pull up the Vendors Explorer view so that you can sort of see what it was before. So if we go into that Explorer view, as you guys have all known, it has a list of columns that are available. And right now we have practically everything that we could ever want. But I'm trying to think of something that we might want to add here. Let's say we're looking at this bit of information and we just want to know what was their last voucher. So it's really great that I have all this content in here, but I want to know either, and I'll let you guys make a choice. Shall we figure out when was the last check cut to them, or when was the last voucher entered for them? What would you like to know?
Last check written.
Last check written, okay. So as we look in this actual column, we're never going to find when was the last check written. You could find it in some of these previews or drill downs, but let's say just as a general lookup, you're going to want to be able to generate a report. And thank you so much, Pat, for answering so quickly. I think Fred doesn't want to do anything. He's like, they're making me learn. So back over here in SQL, we have pulled up this view called VDB Vendor. And I'm going to change this statement to a create. And I'm actually going to call this one vendor. And then I always like to use the exact same nomenclature, but I'm going to call this custom. Now, if you guys are doing work and you want to know something different, you can call this ISM custom. You could call it, you know, if it's going to be Amazing Mail, it could be AMI custom. You can name it whatever you want. And what we're going to do is we now need to go and make sure that I get the where statement out so that I get this clause correct. Excellent. So now I'm going to do something called a left outer join, and that just simply says, listen, if I don't know if I can't figure out when the last check was cut, then I still want it to show all the vendors. So left outer join simply says, I'm going to introduce information about a vendor, but I don't necessarily believe that there's always going to be that information. I may set up a new vendor, he's never been paid, but I still want him to show up in my view, so I want to make sure that I don't restrict him. An inner join, when you're doing work within SQL, simply says, if that content doesn't exist, then that vendor will not show up. So the left outer join is where we're going to work. And then within MAS, everything in the tables obviously has a taxonomy. so it has a naming convention. And anything and everything having to do with our vendors is stored under tables starting with TAP. So I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to start looking at my TAP table structure. Another great thing, and I'm just going to introduce this as a sidebar within SQL, is SQL has this thing called a filter up here. So if you're starting to do work, and obviously there are tons of tables within MAS 500, you can click this little filter object and say, hey, I know the table name, contains or equals this. So we're just going to say, hey, it contains TAP. And now I'm just going to have a list of tables that start with TAP. And if you look up here at the very top, it says that I filter that list. So this just makes it easier for me to work around. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a subquery. So if you look down here, we have this thing called TAP, pend, and here's payment, PMT. So you can look around and you can find that actual vendor payments I'll call the vend payment. So here is the vendor payment table. And it says, here's the vendor payment key. And if I look through this thing, I have my vendor key, which is great because we want to join that into the vendor. It has a post date, and then it has a transaction date. And the transaction date is actually the date that the check is written. So this is very specific. It's not going to be, your debit memos or credit memos against vendors. It's just going to be the vendor payment. So I'm going to actually write my own little select statement here, and I'm going to select the vendor key. And then I'm going to select the max, the most high transaction date, which is also known as the last payment date. So I'm going to select the highest date, and I'm going to call this last paid date. And I'm going to select that from this tap vend payment table. And then because I'm, excuse me, because I am selecting the last paid date as the most current date, I'm going to group it by the vendor key. And that just makes sure that the system understands that I'm only wanting to return information about one vendor, and I just want the last pay date. And if I click the little execute button, I can test my query, and it says, okay, here's the last paid date. Now, transaction ID is the check number. So I could even go in here and say, great, I also want the maximum. Well, it would get a little bit more complicated, but you could select also the maximum check number, so you could figure out which was the last check number. And then I'm going to join this little thing, this statement that I've made, and we're going to call this one, this group called last payment on, and then this is where it becomes fun. MAS 500 nomenclature requires tap vendor, yes. So it does the actual table name. So I'm going to select this on the vendor key here equals my last payment dot vendor key. So now I've joined this bit of information. So now I can actually pull this last pay date into my select statement. So above this from statement, I'm just simply going to add now that column called last payment, which is just pulling it again because I called this little group, this little statement here, last payment right there. And I'm going to return this last paid date here because that's the field I want to see. And then what I can do is before I run it, I can highlight this area without actually generating the view. And I can execute it to make sure that indeed it's going to return the information that I want. So in SQL, and it'll just take a little time to get used to how to do it, we're going to see that indeed we have now the last payment showing up as a column. The system executed the query correctly, so I know that that view is valid. And now I'm going to create it. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, yep, that's what I want to do. I created that view, and we're done. So now back in MAS 500, we need to do a little work because now we have this new lookup that we want, this new Explorer view that we want to introduce into the MAS 500 system. So I know that SQL can be a little daunting. Is everyone following okay with sort of what we've done so far?
Yeah, I am.
I don't know if I could recreate it, but I see where you're going.
Excellent. Well, and you know what? I can help you recreate it. Even you, Pat, can create Explorer views. So back in our System Manager, now we have to go to our task editor because now we're actually going to pull this information into MAS 500. And we need to create a new task. The launch type is always going to be the .NET standard. And we always are going to be using the Business Insights Explorer function in order to do that. If you don't select these two, then my next step, which is basically doing the lookup, if you notice, now it's actually pulling in these VDB views from MAS 500. This would not be populated. So you know that you've selected the wrong thing within the system if when you go to select the view, it doesn't come up with some values here. And then we changed the vendor one. So as we go down here, we have now this VDB vendor ISM custom. And so now we have that information coming across that we anticipated. By default, it's going to name it BE Vend Item Customer, and we can just call this, we can do whatever you want, vendor with last paid date. And then down here we can say displays vendor information with last pay date. Now, one thing to note is that because we are harnessing the power of SQL, we can connect to any system and bring the data back into MAS 500 and display it through an Explorer view, even though it has absolutely no direct link to MAS 500 data. So if you have information from a payroll system, if you have information from a inventory system, a fixed asset system, you know, a card system, and you want to just bring the data in, but you really don't want to connect it to MAS, you can still create in SQL a view called VDB My Inventory. And that's going to pull information from a completely disparate system. It doesn't have to be MAS 500. And then we can also set the default permission. So I'm going to say I want it to be normal. I'm going to click OK, and the system is going to create that within MAS 500.
Josh?
And now I'm going to close it. Yes?
It's Pat. If you're pulling information from another system, what format does it have to be in? Does it have to be?
The business, there is no format required. So when you're pulling information, and this really goes back and sort of uses the power of SQL. So SQL has the ability to connect to any type of source of data. It can be another SQL database. It can be an Oracle database. It could be an Excel spreadsheet. All SQL needs to have defined is really where that information is. So you have the ability within the server objects to create what they call linked servers. And if you click those little providers, it gives you some defaults. So these are different methods that it can connect. So you would go through the process of saying, I want to connect to this other system. But all that's handled in SQL. Once you make that connection, the data in that other system is now available for you to use.
Okay.
So really, and SQL is so robust that I've not run into an issue where I haven't been able to get the information I want.
Okay.
So we went in, we created that SQL view within SQL, and we created it called VDB vendor. _ISM custom. So that was the first thing that we did is we went in here and we said, okay, this is the information that we want. And actually, I need to refresh the views. And then I'm going to place the same filter on the views, and I'm going to just do VDV. So as I'm going back and speaking with you about those views, I don't have to look through all of them. So we went through, the first step was we created our own unique data lookup. So we wanted to find information. The next part is that we went into MAS 500, and we went into the task editor. We clicked Add New Task, and the system created, hopefully, no, it doesn't even start by task ID. Good Lord, I really dislike the way this works sometimes. Our new task called Vendor with Last Paid Date, which is right here if we double click. So we create our link to SQL. Now, by default, the system has already now gone into, when I created that task, it's gone in and created a new business insight view. So if I go down here, it should be in our list here of Vendor ISM Custom. So here is our own Insights Explorer view. So when I created the task using that task editor, the system went in and created these captions. Now you can go in and you can actually make adjustments as far as different column mappings. You can create navigator lists to do the drill into, and you can create additional relationships. And really, when you're doing something like this and you're using something that already exists, the best thing to do, as you know, is to open up two of the exact same screens within MAS 500 and say, hey, you know what? I really based that lookup off of the existing vendor information. So I want to go into this one, and I want to see how it is that they did set up some of these column mappings, how they set up the navigation tasks. So you can go in and you could actually copy this information, click the drill into, and show where the destination view would be. All this information you can copy from one to the other. And this takes a little bit more time than we have because, again, I'm supposed to stick to an hour. But you do have the ability, when you create these views, to create the same level of functionality that the views within MAS 500, these Explorer views within MAS 500 have. So I could go in here into my drill down and say, okay, I want to go ahead and create a destination view called Requester. And now I'm going to start creating some of those relationships. The system is going to make sure that you create the relationship view first so it knows how to figure out that relationship. So if we look at Requester, it should have been in here. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Oh, it's on the Requester line. So it's pulling it in, and the relationship is the requester. So I'm going to create this bridge. I'm going to tell it how this bridge is going to look, So this takes a little bit more time, but the functionality is there. I don't want to save changes. So if I go back to Accounts Payable, I'm on my Explorer task. And right now, I want to go ahead and I want to add to my task. So I want to actually create a new task, and I'm going to create a MAS 500 task. And it's going to be from the Business Insights Explorer. And as I click this little drop down, as I go down, what I should see is, I think it's probably under BE, yes, Vendor with Last Paid. And now I can change the task name and call it Vendor with Last Paid Date. Click OK. I can set it up right underneath my vendor. And when I double click on that, it's going to activate the Explorer view, just like we had seen before, with all the same functionality. However, I will have a vendor last paid date. Let's see where it's at. Should be under, and it's right there, last paid date. So again, you can come in and customize. As we look over here, I think it put absolutely everything in its own special order, but there's my last pay date. And so I'm going to sort this so that I have actually an example. So I can look here and I can say, okay, this customer had a last pay date. And this is when you have to sort of clean up. Unfortunately, MAS is horrible at setting up new views because it doesn't understand some of the vendor. I'm just going to do, and remember you can always drag. So I'm just trying to, oh, good heavens. Lord love, this part of the process is always the one that pains me. There's really no way of doing it other than this initial setup. Click OK. And now we have this vendor, and we can go in and say, here's my last pay date. I'm going to move this right next. So this vendor, and then the vendor name I think was equally far, far away. Let's see, there he is. Sometimes it's just easier to do it in the interface, if you know what I mean. Move it over in little short spurts because sometimes it just doesn't move at the same rate that I want it to. I'm just going to keep moving it. You know me, I'm a little bit OCD with how things look, so I end up spending almost as much time as I take creating something, I'm putting it. So Zero Zone Refrigerator was last paid on 8/25/11. And that really is creating an Explorer view and how simple it is to create Explorer view. There's links to additional data in MAS 500. So again, just in a quick review, the first step we did is we went into Excel and we created a lookup. Now, if you were adjusting an existing one, you could go in and you could add this to the existing Vendor Explorer view. The next time you launch it, the column would appear. So we went in, we added the content, so we added the source of the data. We added the column that we wanted to display. Then we went into MAS 500. We went into our System Manager. We went under Tools to our Task Editor, and we actually created that link between our new view and MAS 500, and we made sure that our view started with the nomenclature DVD because it has to be in that format for MAS 500 to bring it in. So then we went into our Task Editor. We created the whole new view for ourselves, and once we added it by clicking the OK button, we went down to the module that we wanted. We went to our Explorer. We created a new MAS 500 task because obviously we had already adjusted it, created that link, and launched it. Very simple, just in a few quick steps. Questions right off the bat?
No, we're good.
Was that Fred?
No, that's Dave. Here at Amazing Mail.
Oh, David Amazing Mail. Yeah, so do you guys have any specific questions? I mean, is this sort of what you anticipated to see? I want to make sure that these Lunch and Learn sessions are beneficial to our customers, so I want to make sure that this is sort of meeting the expectation.
I think that for Star and Dave, they want a little more basic idea of actually, going out to Explorer and what it does. Some of the things, I use it more often than anybody else, and so I've learned how to do some of the things out there.
Okay.
But some of the basic things like the drill downs and stuff, a lot of times I can't even get those to work. So,
okay.
or they're not going where I want them to go anyway.
Absolutely.
So, and then the Star has a specific question about, and I don't know if this relates to Explorer. When we get it relates to the analyze portion. When you get into analysis, like analyze a customer. And when you pull up a customer analysis, especially when it relates to a credit issue, it throws a whole bunch of numbers up there, and it says that the customer is over their credit limit when they're really not.
Okay.
And I don't know whether we're just not reading the report correctly, or whether there's some settings that need to be changed when that analysis comes up, because the numbers that come up don't make any sense.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay.
So
and I don't know if that relates.
I don't think that this database has that information, but let's look up something like a vendor history. The one thing that we need to know about the way in which the analyze function works and where it's pulling its data is that when you're finding that the content that you're getting, especially within, let's say, one of these pivot table. It is summing up information from these data views. And so you need to look and make sure that that content is actually correct. Because as you've seen when you're looking at some of the customers, it can use information especially related to a credit limit based on the last time that you aged that particular customer. So if the aging hasn't been run in several months, it may think that their available credit is negative $100, but that's dealing with the fact that they last were aged in June, and now they've made payments and they've done all these things. So it's always a good idea, especially when you're doing information like it, looking at these Explorer views, because MAS needs to have some of these functions done. I always go to my activities, I go into my utilities, and I go, okay, I want to make sure that everything has been aged correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to age my vendors. And I'm going to do that right now because I want to make sure that the content that I'm looking at is up to date. So I'm just going to age it as of today. Again, it doesn't hurt anything. But as you can see, this one hasn't been run since August. Obviously, I'm in a test company, a demo company. But now the amount of outstanding items has significantly changed, and so now those functions within MAS are going to look a little better, because especially within vendor or customer analysis, the outstanding balance is coming from the aging. And so if that aging is out of date, then that balance is out of date, and those numbers are going to look weird, and you're not going to be able to tie it back to anything. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Let me ask you this. So each time, is there a way to set it so that what it's really pulling is real time instead of always going back to an aging? Because as STAR's running invoices, it pops up and it says, whoops, your customer is over their credit limit, and then it gives you this analysis, this information screen, and the numbers are not right, and they're really not over their limit when she actually goes in and pulls up the open invoices. So if it's pulling it based on an aging, is there a way to get it not to do that?
I would have to double check, but I believe that we are sort of stuck with that function right now. Would you like to say? Yes. I'm going to go into the standard bar. So I know that Fred's always also online with us today. Fred, do you have any questions right now? Or Jeff, not Fred. Sorry, my bad.
All right. No, but you know, I appreciate you showing me this stuff. I'm really interested in seeing what all this thing can do.
Okay, cool. So we're going to look at some general, like how to use the Explorer views, and then we're going to look at this one quick question that Amazing Mail has sort of asked, since we do have some other people online. Jeff, do you have any specific questions? Are you guys having any issues or wanting to look at certain data?
Not right now, not that I can think of.
Okay. Always good. And you're with Northwest Orthopedics, correct?
Northern Arizona Orthopedics, yeah.
Northern Arizona. I love it. And are you in the IT department working with Zoltan?
No, I'm not. I'm working in the finance department. We're pretty much the only ones who work with MAS 500 here. So. I'm
sorry?
I'm working in the finance department.
Okay.
We're pretty much the only ones who use the MAS 500.
Right. Gotcha. It's been a while since I've been up there visiting. All right, so let's go into accounts receivable. Let's see, as far as options go, oh, that's right. I don't have a demo company. Let's see, do I have one in here? Hoping, let's see, do I have SOA? Yeah. Now remember that when we do make these changes, within MAS, all of them are related to a company. So if you are creating unique views, you always, I'm going to sort of click out this column specifier, you will always find within the view a company ID field right here. That has to be in every view if you want it to limit the information when you switch between companies. Otherwise, if there is no company ID, it's going to give you all data for all companies in the database. So it's sort of critical to have that company ID field listed in the view so that as you switch through companies within the MAS 500 desktop, it also updates those views to only pull content from a specific company. So let's go into accounts receivable, maintenance, AR setup, AR options. And let's see, when you turn on the credit, I think there is very few options for us. Required credit limit checking. Yeah, that's what I thought. Credit limit checking is really quite, what's a good word? Simple. So, Pat, my thought process with your issue where we do have customers that we go in and it is incorrectly pulling up really how much is outstanding, is that we just need to maybe schedule some store procedures to run automatically throughout the day in order to update really what that outstanding balance for the customer is. Because I will confirm with Stuart, but I'm fairly certain that it is actually looking at, let's go into manage.
Well, that would make sense.
And I'm going to look at
it's pulling the aging, the last aging.
Manage. Customer status. Okay, there it is. So I'm almost sure that it's going in, if I go into customer status and I look at their current balance, obviously Abbott here doesn't have one. Let's see if we can find one that does. Yeah. So I think it's looking at this value here. And as you know, if we go in and we update and we say, okay, let's re-age this, that this number can change quite significantly, that this number could be less because we do have payments. So
that arrow.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What, you clicked on that little arrow and that was like an update key?
Right, so this is an update key that only ages this one customer. So if I'm having a customer that's causing me fits, and let's say I'm in Invoices. So if you go in, even in Invoices, I'm going to do that real quick. Make activities, process invoices. And I'm creating a new batch, and I'm just going to go into my enter invoices function. So I'm saying in here, and I create a new invoice, and I go into my customer, and I type Abbott. And I start going at it, and all of a sudden I start getting those stupid credit overrides, and I know it's wrong. Just right-hand mouse click our manage, and click our customer status. It's going to go in and it's going to pull up this customer right away. And then you can click this button to age it immediately. And now it's going to update that customer with all the current information. And I shouldn't get that nuisance screen anymore because the moment that this customer, well, what it calls it is a customer history table. Once this table is updated, now its available credit would be changed. So going into the customer status is going to show you what's their available credit really quick, what its AR is, and then it should update it as soon as you click that button. And I heard Star ask a question.
Ask your question, Star.
Did you say that it could be set up automatically, do it on all the customers?
Yeah, I believe, you know what, I know that we've run into this with other customers, and I'm just going to write it down as a follow-up item. But I believe there's a, well, let's take a look here. I think it's SPAR age. So out here under the wonderful store, SPAR age customer account. Yeah, so I believe that we can actually get this procedure here, this SPAR age customer account, to run, and run it like every 15 minutes so that it really just keeps the aging up to date and then make sure that that available credit field is always up to date.
Okay.
That would be good.
I thought maybe it was...
What I'll do is I'll send out a follow-up email, and I'll CC Pat and yourself, Star, and I'm just going to send it to Stuart to confirm that I am correct because I'd rather not go through a path as far as making a change and not know that's going to have an impact. Age customers to increase to properly reflect current balance. But yeah, so what I'll do is I will just make sure, I want to confirm that that's correct with Stuart first. Obviously, Stuart is all-knowing in all these things. I'm really confident that that's the issue, but I always like to get a little verification from the guru of it all, and then we can move forward.
Okay. So can you take us back to basics out there with out in the Explorer part, and how those different drill downs and analyze how that when you pull up something in Explorer, how those all work?
Absolutely. So let's go into Explorer and really customers. You'll see the Explorer obviously from a lot of different windows, and what we have here is the screen display. Pardon me, I'm getting over pneumonia here, so I do apologize. So this preview function right here, if you notice it has this little split screen, and it is really talking about what's below. So as I click through here, if you notice, see the name here on my screen, I'm going to try to circle this, Open Invoices, now Open RMA, and now Open Projects. Notice that this is updating every time I click the preview. So based on what I'm selecting above, I'm going to go into Open Orders. Based on the customer that I'm selecting through, this preview window here is just going to show me whatever I've selected here. Now, within the product, within the Explorer product, we have a ton of SQL. I'm going to cough one more time. I'm going to get a glass of water and try not to cough again. So within Explorer, we have a lot of SQL-like functions. And those are up here within this primary bar. It really starts with this About Explorer and then moves right. So we have the Find function, just like Control-F. If there's data somewhere in this grid, and I click this and I type in ABB, first of all, we have a list of the fields that we want, or all the columns, any part, and how we're going to search. So right now I'm saying match case, search down, search all, search up. I want to go to Abbott. So see how it just went up there and it found it. So if you're, oops, I double-clicked. If you're doing something like an Explorer in General Ledger Transactions and you're looking for an amount, you can do this Find function once you display all your transactions, and it will find it for you. We have the Open, the Split View. So me clicking this button actually turns on and off this view below. So if I click it, it turns it off. If I click it, it turns it on. There's the Show Splitter function. I don't recommend using it ever. It is not really very helpful. And what it does is, notice it replicates multiple columns. So if I turn it on and off, it's really just replicating this column function. So if I want to see a column that's way over here, and I'm looking over here, then now I can see those columns. Most people just don't find a benefit. Now we get to some of the fun stuff. Number one, what columns am I going to see? This is where you can turn things on and off. I don't care if it's paid by national, if it's consolidated. None of this information has any value to me, so I'm just going to start clicking it and turning it off so that my grid starts reducing down to something that makes sense for me. I can then move, obviously, the columns around to wherever I want them to be so that it displays the content that I anticipate in the right order. So this Edit Column function just is really where I can turn off information that has no value to me. And once I make these changes, they will stick with my login for as long as I'm working within MAS. This stays. Excuse me again. The other thing is enable grouping. So let's look at something. I'm going to actually go back to, I'm going to turn off Enable Grouping. I'm going to go back here because there are things called customer classes, and I know that you guys deal with this a lot with your vendor classes. So I'm going to move this over here to the top. So I want to know when I want to see content about my customers, but I want to group them by their class. So like doing a pivot table in Excel, I can turn on this grouping function, and now I can go in and I can say, here are my Northeast customers, and here are my Northwest customers, and here are my Southeast customers. Now, you guys are dealing with MAS 500 7.4, which is a lot different than MAS 500 7.3, in that you can extract information. Right now, the export functions are limited. If you have MAS 500 7.4, let me get into one that does. I'm going to go into Accounts Receivable, same Explorer view. I just had an older system because I'm never sure what the customers have. But I know that you guys have 7.4. So in MAS 500 7.4, when I have those columns up and they're being displayed, and we'll wait for this thing to load real quick. If I want to export that data, I now have a function called Export Data on Grid. Have you guys used that?
Oh, yes, I love it.
Yeah, so we need to just make sure, I guess I should refresh, and I'm just going to let that run. Jeff, I don't think that you guys are on 7.4. You might be. I'm going to wait for this function to run, and then I'll show you the differences. Okay. So back over here, I'm going to sort of close this and get out some of all this stuff that I have. Okay, so now I can click through here, and I can sort of see what's going on. Now, the drill into function really is about taking me to another area within MAS. So when I'm in the preview function, it's saying as I click on the customer above, the content below is going to give me some additional information. Now, if I'm on the sales order down here and I right-hand mouse click, I can do functions there. I can explore the sales orders, in which case it's going to open up a new Explorer. I can drill into the shipments related to this. So all this is about relational information in MAS. So I'm on a customer here, and here is its sales orders there. And now this sales order is open, but if I right-hand mouse click, I can figure out, do I want to see the invoices? Were there invoices for that sales order? If there were, then it would display that. Or the manage function is more like going to something in MAS 500. So if I go to View Edit Sales Order, and I'll click on this, it's going to find this sales order, number 53, and it's going to say, oh yeah, I'm so curious about that sales order. Maybe I want to add something to it, like an additional item, because we're going to sell it. If you're in Accounts Payable, it would take you to View Edit Vouchers so you could change when it's getting paid. But basically, it's just going to open up that activity screen within MAS 500 that you would use for normal data entry and data processing. So it just allows you to get to information. Notice my Explorer view stayed open without leaving. The other thing you can do is customer maintenance. So I want to maintain the customer. And it's all about where you're clicking, what it's going to provide you. In the preview area, I have the manage. In the display area, I don't. Does that make sense? So again, preview is about relational content. Information on the top of the grid in the Explorer view is related to the information below, and what's being displayed I control with the preview. Drill into is literally going to another Explorer. So I'm on this particular customer, and I want to look at any invoices related to that customer. When I click the drill into function, all of a sudden, up here within my filter, it says the customer is Ms. Hand, which is the person I was just dealing with. And now I see every invoice that has been sent to that customer. On the bottom is additional information, mainly invoice lines, payments that have been made against them, commissions that were generated during the activity, if someone entered a memo. So again, it takes some time to get used to this, but it's all about relational information, things that have something to do with this invoice. So preview is what information. Drill into is just simply displaying another Explorer. And if you notice the original Explorer is gone, you could get to it by clicking the back button. So drill into is taking you to a new view. Now I'm at Invoices. This is another great example of what you can do. So if I want to know what the total of the invoices that have been sent to this customer, I can click the nice little sum function, the alpha sign up here, and then I can tell it what I want to do. Again, just like Excel. When I do that, it's going to show a total below. Now, right now, my system is actually limited to a single customer. If I take this information off, if I say, okay, I really don't want this, so I want to go ahead and I'm going to delete this line, that means I'm going to now display all of my invoices. This is where the grouping function can give you some help. So right now I have my customer name being displayed right here. And if I look, I'm going to move this to the beginning. So here's my customer, and I say, great, but most of the time I go to by customer ID. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to find another column. Fortunately, they named it customer. So in reality, this is my customer ID. This is my customer name. If I go back into that edit grouping, I have two columns, customer and customer. Look it down here. See where it says source? And if you look right here, it tells you what information is actually being displayed, customer ID. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, nope, this is customer ID. I'm going to click OK. And here it says, this is the customer name, although I see it in my Explorer as customer as a caption. So now I'm going to change this to customer name. So now my grid is showing content a little bit better because it gave me a better understanding of what data is actually there. And I discovered that data by looking at my columns and figuring out from the source what information is really being used. And right here is the table that's being pulled from. So Explorer views can provide additional information that you're just not going to find when you're in a customer maintenance screen. That's not going to give you what table is it being pulled from. So now I'm going to turn on my grouping function again. I'm going to drag the customer ID up into that group function. And because I turned on the sum and I told it to add all the sales, now real quickly I can see here are all my sales for this particular customer. They had 13 million since the dawn of time. You can use the filter function to then change the perspective. Okay, I want to know the post date is between, and I can now say, I think that all this information is fairly old. Yeah, 2008. So I want to know 01/2008 through 12/31/2008. So I just want to know what was sold in the last year. And all of a sudden, as soon as I limit the data, now I have information about just this last year. So you can sort of create ad hoc reports and sort it by a method. So now I want to know really by sales amount whether or not they're being sold a certain way. So again, it's completely up to you, but you can group it. You can do additional grouping as well. So if I go back in here, I saw that indeed I did have my customer class available. So I just added customer class. And now I'm going to drag that up into my filter. So now I can see in the last year, the Northeast group has done $10 million worth of sales. Within that, here are those customers. And within that customer, here is all of their sales. So people who are used to Excel can sort of grasp this because we are creating mini pivot tables. Now the analyze functions, those aren't used actually quite as often. 9 times out of 10, people who use the analyze function are going to end up doing it in Excel because that's going to be a little bit more robust than what MAS can do. But has that provided sort of a good overview of functionality within the Explorers within MAS 500?
Yeah.
Did that work?
Yeah.
Does that make it easier, a little easier to understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, that
So
was
the
good,
last
Josh.
thing is that when you do things like this, you want to click this little Save button with the Save Setting As and call this Josh's Customer Invoice Totals. So make sure I don't have to set it as a default. I don't really need to display it. But now I have my standard one, which had just sorted by customer ID or whatever I want. I could take this out, have it just show every customer, click the Save button. And then when I go into Josh's one, this Save function is going to go ahead and provide me some limitations. And I can go in here and say, ooh, I don't want it to limit by customer, click Save. And now Josh's standard has everyone. Josh's customer has the customer. Does this make sense?
Yeah, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
If you create this view like this and you save this particular screen, this configuration that you just put together, is there a way to get it to appear out in your main MAS thing as a task so that you can just click on it from there and run it each time, or do you have to go into Explorer each time and then select it?
Well, of course, you can great question. So if you did something like this, like Explore Invoices, which I just did, and I created this sort of my own one, it was this one right here that we just did. If I right-hand click, I can add it to my tasks. And now I'm going to actually, I just need to view, show my Task Explorer. So when I click on this one right here, now it's going to pop up. And I have mine set here. But if I click the Save As function, see this uses default? And I'm going to override it yes. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to exit. I'm going to re-click this one. And because I set this one as the default, now that setting is the one that comes up when I launch it. Now that's going to be the same if I launch it anywhere within MAS 500. So you really can't create your own Explorer limitation by setting, so that if I come into it, if I click on it under, let's say, Explore Invoices under Insights in AR, this one here is not different from that one there. The setting, so now if I go over here and I double click on this Explorer view, because they are the same, it's going to automatically go to my particular setting.
Okay.
So unfortunately, there isn't a way within MAS 500 to do what you're asking, where basically I'm copying everything about this Explorer, but this one here is going to remain the standard, and this one here is going to be special. Now, unfortunately, we can create a shortcut to it. We can tell it what to do by default, but that is going to be pervasive throughout the entire product.
Okay. And those things are specific by user, right?
Right. Very much user-based.
Okay.
And real quick, back in 7.4, I think, Jeff, you don't have it, but the export options is really when you go into Excel, it's data in grid or all data. This function is what's new in 7.4 that isn't available in 7.3. So, Jeff, if you start using this a lot, you may want to, we may want to upgrade you if you are already upgraded.
Right, okay.
Just to let you know. The other thing to note is that if, indeed, you've created some really cool stuff in here, Pat, and people are like, this is kick-ass, how do I get it? You can go into your tools, and your setting options, you can export those and send them. So when I click export, it says, what do you want to do? Well, I want to export this particular setting, and I'm going to browse. You can put it wherever you want, quite honestly. You're going to go out here, and I'm going to put it under my temp directory.
Oh, I see where it's going.
Temp. And I'm going to say, this is Josh's Cool Explorer. And I click Save. And I export it. So now you could send it to someone else. They would go into Tools, Export, and they would import that setting. So they would browse out. They would find it under, go up here. Come here. Josh's cool export, open it up, and now they can prompt replace, don't import. There are settings that you can do if it sees a duplicate, but you can bring it in. You just need to do it from the same Explorer. So if you export an Explorer invoice, you can't really import that into AP. It just won't work. But you do have the ability to sort of share some of the things that you may do. You can work on stuff, get it ready for a particular individual, and then give it to them later. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So that's using Business Insights Explorer, and that's something that's readily available in MAS 500. And just so that we can, not that I'm harping, just remember to get your login for Sage Software online and look underneath that Customer Support MAS 500 and then under the knowledge base videos, because the content that we covered today is also covered there in a video. So, and it's only about a 3 or 5 minute video, but it shows you a highlight of just those specific functions that we've done. So, and I'll show you here Business Insight Tasks. It comes up, it's a nice little streaming OS video, and then you can sort of go over here at Sage, and it's going to walk you through creating the view in SQL, what the nomenclature has to be, in System Manager, going to the task editor, what you must choose. So it really shows everything that we've covered today. It's just doing it in an area that you can actually, review it in the future. So I just wanted to point that out so no one thinks that they're all alone.
Josh, we know you're always there.
Absolutely. It's just, you know what, I even forget sometimes the steps, and I just remember that video being really helpful as saying, it doesn't give you how to get all the content, but it definitely says, you go here and do step 1, you go here and do step 3, you here and do step 4, and you're done. So it's a great resource. One of the ones they did really well. Jeff, do you have any questions?
No, I really don't.
Okay. Pat and Pat's group?
Are we good?
I'm good.
We're good.
Okay,
Thank you
cool.
very much, Josh.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks.
And then just one little ancillary thing. Again, this is how to take care of reporting within MAS 500. So obviously, the person who's using this content has to be a MAS 500 user. When you get to that level, Explorer views, you can also use SQL reporting services if you wish. That's another option. And that one, I think we've created reports for you, Pat, but that allows you to do, like, here's one that's doing financials. So this is a website that allows you to produce content from MAS 500 using those exact same views, so you don't have to change anything, but this one doesn't require that the user have access to MAS 500. They don't have to have a login, you don't have to have any security set up. So just another option when it comes to reporting, but that's basically Explorer views in MAS 500.